To deploy Fortigate Firewall in AWS the right way, you've got to be able to visualize it. So it all starts with a design. Let's go through this step by step. I'm in the VPC dashboard and I'm going to delete the default VPC. So now we're going to build our own VPC from scratch. I believe if you can build it, you can fix it. So let's create our VPC. I'm going to call this SR VPC. And our network address is going to be 10.160.0.0/16. This is our summary address or the supernet. And we click on create VPC. Our VPC is in place. Now the next thing to do is to create our internet gateway. This is the default internet gateway. Let's refresh because we did delete everything about this VPC. Create internet gateway, and this I'm just going to call IGW. Now our internet gateway is created, but you'll notice that the state is detached. So you attach your VPC. Our VPC is now attached to our internet gateway. It's important to note that the internet gateway provides our VPC, our virtual data center, with internet connectivity. And also this is where all the network address translation takes place, meaning all the workloads inside our virtual private data center, they will traverse the internet gateway to reach the internet, and they will be source netted behind the internet gateway because the internet gateway has a public IP address. But more importantly, the other thing that happens simultaneously as we created our internet gateway is that the implicit router also gets created. So when you subnet in AWS, there's a bunch of IP reservations that you need to be aware of. The first thing is the .0 is a network address that is reserved. Of course, we can't use that. .1 will belong to the implicit router. .2 belongs to the DNS service. .3 is reserved by AWS for future use. .4 is in reality the very first usable IP address that we can actually use. And then the other IP address that's reserved is the broadcast address. If we're using /24, it's going to be .255. AWS doesn't allow broadcast, so they reserve that IP address. And talking about subnetting, let's create our subnets. We go to subnets. Let's refresh this because this was deleted as part of the default VPC. In this lab, we're going to create a total of 5 subnets, and I'm going to show you why. We'll create 3 in availability zone 1, 1 in availability zone 2 and 3 respectively. So let's get started. Create subnet, select our VPC, and we'll call this one LAN 10. This we're going to put in 4A, AP Southeast 4A, and we're going to address it as 10.160.10.0/24. Then we add the second subnet, LAN 20, also in AP Southeast 4A, 10.160.20.0/24. The third subnet is going to be LAN 30, also in AP Southeast 4A, and it will be 10.160.30.0/24. The fourth subnet, LAN 40. This one is going to be in AP Southeast 4B, and it's going to be 10.160.40.0/24. Now our last and final subnet is going to be LAN 5, LAN 50, and this one will be in AP Southeast 4C. And the address there is going to be 10.160.50.0/24. I believe all our subnets are created. Let's now create our route tables. So the way we're going to create our route tables, LAN 10 of the subnets that we created is going to be a public facing subnet, and it's actually the only subnet that's going to be on the public side of the VPC. The rest of the networks are going to be private, meaning they'll be protected, they'll be behind our firewall. So let's create our public route table first. And I'm going to call this public. we need to associate that with the VPC and click on create. Actually, while I'm on this subnet, while I'm on this route table, I'm going to associate the subnet, edit associations, and add LAN 10. Like we said, LAN 10 is going to be public facing. Anything that we provision in LAN 10 is going to be part of the public facing subnet. And let's create another one, the private subnet. I'm just going to call it private. Associate it with our VPC and click create route table. Let's associate subnets to this route table. Like we said, everything in this, all the subnets will be associated with this route table except for LAN 10, which is already associated with the public route table. Another thing that you would have noticed is that the default route table is still there and we can't delete it because it's selected as the main route table. Now what we need to do is select a new route table. I'm going to select the private route table as a new main route table. And the reason for that is, going forward, all the new networks that we're going to provision, they'll automatically be associated with the private route table. It's a good idea to do this because we don't want for the new subnet to be inadvertently associated with the public subnet. That will be a security issue. So as best practice, we want to make the private route table the main route table. And I'm going to click on actions, set this main route table, set, and refresh. And now that we have in the new main route table as our private route table, we can actually now delete the default route table. Delete. So we have our internet gateway, we created our subnets, we associated the subnets with the correct route tables. The next thing in preparation of launching our Fortigate is to create the security group. The security group is going to allow us to define which inbound traffic would be permitted into the VPC. And we already know we want only management traffic to be able to enter into our VPC for us to manage the Fortigate. We go to EC2 and we navigate down to network and security. We click on security groups, create security group, and I'm just going to call this MGMT, and the description, allow MGMT. We associate this with our VPC as well, and you'll notice that immediately after creating this, by default, all outbound traffic is permitted from anywhere 0.0.0.0/0, and I'm just going to give it a description. Allow all outbound. And then on the inbound, I'm only going to specify HTTPS from anywhere, and I'm going to give it a description. Allow HTTPS, and that's all I'm going to allow. I'm not even going to allow SSH or ping because we're not going to use those protocols. We'll enable them, we'll add them on the inbound when we need to. Create security group. Now our security group is in place. Now that our security group is in place, let's create network interfaces that are going to be used by the Fortigate. Because we already have the security group, as part of the process, we'll be able to associate them with the security group. And for us to do this, we go to network interfaces, and let's create our network interfaces. LAN 20. I'm going to start with LAN 20 because as part of the provisioning process, the Fortigate comes already with an interface defined that we didn't create ourselves. And LAN 20 is going to be in this subnet, LAN 20. I'm going to give it an IP address 10.160.20.5. And I'm going to associate it with the security group we just created. I'm going to give it a name. LAN 20. Let's create another one. This will be LAN 30. And it's going to be associated with the LAN 30 subnet. Once again, I'm going to give it an IP address 10.160.30.5 as well, and associate the management security group. The key value pair there, name and the value LAN 30. The next one is LAN 40. Associate with LAN 40 subnet. Give it an IP address. Associate to the security group. LAN 40. And now on to our last and final network interface, LAN 50, and associated with subnet 50. Give it an IP address 10.160.50.5. Associate to management security group, LAN 50. In AWS, there's a control mechanism for EC2 instances and ENI interfaces that says an instance has to be a source of the traffic. It needs to be originating the traffic, or it needs to be a destination of the traffic in order for this instance to process that traffic. If the instance did not originate the traffic, or it's not even the destination of that traffic, it'll drop the traffic. But we know in this case, in this particular case, the firewall, most of the time, it's not going to be originating this traffic, and it's not going to be the destination of the traffic either. So this setting has to be disabled. And for us to do that, we select our interfaces one at a time, and we find the change source destination check. This one I've just disabled. We go to LAN 50, change source destination check behavior, untick. LAN 30, source destination check, disable. Last but not least, LAN 40, source destination check, disable. So now all our interfaces have source destination check disabled. With all these in place, I believe we are ready now to bring up our Fortigate. And for us to do that, we go to EC2 instances, launch an instance. I'm going to give it a name, Fortigate 01. And while we're here, you need to click on here to browse for more AMIs. And then it brings out the options that we can see here, quick AMIs, but we want to go to AWS Marketplace. And in the AWS Marketplace AMIs, we need to search for Fortigate. So I found the Fortigate, select. The first field that we need to change is the instance type. I'm going to select T3 medium because it has 2 virtual CPUs and 4 gig of memory. This is enough for our purpose. The next thing that we need to complete here is the key pair. We need to create one. I don't have one for this, so I'll just call this new Fortigate. And let's create our key pair. And now the next field is the network settings. Let's click on network settings. And like I said, there is a network interface that gets created by default. And as you can see here, it's associated with LAN 40, which is wrong. I need for this to be associated with LAN 10. So now that interface is part of LAN 10 subnet, our public facing subnet. The next thing is auto assign public IP. We don't want to auto assign a public IP for the Fortigate. The simple reason for that is Typically, when you deploy a Fortigate in AWS or in the cloud environment, it's for production. And what happens with these auto-assigned public IPs is when you reboot that firewall, you lose that IP address. So for this, we need a static IP address. So here, auto-assign, I'm going to say disable. That means this firewall is going to come up without a public IP address. It's not going to be reachable from the internet, but that's okay. We'll deal with that later. We don't want to create a security group because we already have a security group. Let's select it. That's MGMT. The next set of config here, config storage, this you have to give a little bit of thought to, because in production environments, you might require additional space for logging and that sort of thing. So, but for our purpose, I'm okay with the settings. And with that, I believe this is the end of our config options. And while this is happening, I'm going to set up our Elastic Network interface. We go to Elastic IPs. We want to allocate an Elastic IP. I'm going to give it a name. I'm just going to call it Fortigate 01 and allocate. Our firewall instance has now been fully built. Now we can go to instances and we see that it's still initializing. But while this is going on, we can already attach our public IP, our Elastic IP. We go back and we select our IP. We go to actions, associate Elastic IP address. And here I'm actually going to select a network interface in LAN. Oh, this Elastic interface that we didn't create. This is the new default Elastic interface that came with the firewall. And as you can see, it does have an IP address in the 10.160.10 subnet, which is okay. And we associate. So now our Fortigate has both the LAN interface IP as well as the public IP address in the public subnet. Let's have a look at our Fortigate. Our private address is 10.160.10.73 and our public address is 16.50.255.192. When this device is ready, we'll be able to access it using this IP address. But at the moment, we won't be able to reach it because we are not done with our configs yet. Let's have a look at our instance state. Yep, it's still busy initializing. But the more important thing that we need to do is to go back to our VPC, is to go back to our routing. So we have the two route tables. The public facing route table needs a route to the internet. And so we need to go and edit routes. Right now, we only know of the 10.160.0.0/16, our local network. We don't know how to get to the internet. So we need to define a static route, a default static route. To do that, you click on edit routes, add route, and we're going to forward. Our next hop is going to be the internet gateway. We have only one internet gateway, of course. Click on OK. So now the public subnet has a way to break out to the internet via the internet gateway. With the private route table, we want for all the traffic to traverse the Fortigate, meaning we're not routing traffic to the internet gateway. Instead, we're forwarding traffic to the Fortigate. So all the private subnets will be forwarding traffic to the Fortigate. We click on routes, edit routes, add the default route. And for this, I'm actually also going to select a network interface, and I'm going to select the LAN 20 network interface. So now let's have a look at our Fortigate and see. And now it looks like our Fortigate is ready. And yes, it is. So I'm going to select the Fortigate and copy the instance ID. When we log on to the Fortigate for the first time, we're going to need the instance ID because it's going to be used as a password, the initial password. The username, admin, password, instance ID that we just copied. And we're forced to change the password. And now the new password That's successful. Now we need to use the new password to log in. And now we're successfully logged on to our Fortigate. Let's log on and look at our network interfaces. We go to Network, Interfaces. And as we can see, we only have one network interface, but we did prepare for all of this. Now let's go to our EC2 and attach the network interfaces that we created. And for that, we go down to Network and Security, Network Interfaces. This is that network interface that was created as part of the process of creating the EC2 instance, our Fortigate. I'm going to call this LAN 10. But what we want to do is associate LAN 30. Oh, let's start with LAN 20. Attach, we select the VPC as well as the instance. Now that ENI, that Elastic Network Interface, will be attached and it's now successful. Now let's go and attach LAN 30. Attach. The VPC is selected. We select the EC2 instance that we want to attach this to. Attach. That is successful. Now let's attach LAN 40. Attach our VPC. Nothing comes up. We are not able to associate this Elastic Network Interface to the Fortigate. The Fortigate is not available here as an option. Let's try LAN 50. Attach. In the same VPC, the Fortigate is not available. So what you would remember is that LAN 40 and LAN 50. Let's have a look here. All the Elastic Network interfaces are in AP Southeast 4A, except for these last two, LAN 40 and LAN 50. Trying to associate them with the Fortigate fails. This means that for every availability zone, in this case, AP Southeast 4A, our Fortigate is in AP Southeast 4A, and we can only attach network interfaces that are in the same availability zone. We can create multiple subnets in the same zone, but we cannot associate subnets from other availability zones to the Fortigate, which is in a different availability zone. They may all be resources in the same region, but you need a Fortigate firewall per availability zone. If we follow the logic that we're working in Melbourne, and Melbourne has 3 availability zones, and if we have resources in each of those availability zones, it means we would need to create a Fortigate in each of those availability zones. So we'll end up with 3 Fortigate firewalls. So now let's look at our resources. Let's look at what we've built. Let's go to our VPC and then look at our resource map. Here we have the static route VPC that has a supernet address of 10.160.0.0/16. And this VPC has 5 subnets. LAN 10 is mapped to a public route table. LAN 20, 30, 40, and 50 are mapped to a private route table. These 2 route tables belong to the implicit router, which belongs to the internet gateway. And this is our resource map. Now from our Fortigate, let's test and see if we do in fact have internet reachability. 1.1.1.1. And yes, we do. Well, that's it for this lesson. I'd like to thank you for sticking with me to the end. Please join me in my next video where we're going to be discussing SSL VPNs for remote access VPN with FortiClient. Again, thank you for watching and supporting the channel.